the Donald Trump agenda, because he's talked about those things frankly and openly, and I think they were huge factors in his ability to win that past election. And if he gets on message and stays on it, stays on those principal positions, I think he'll be in a position to come back and win this election.
Former Attorney General Jeff Sessions with that message to the Republican Party and Donald Trump in his concession speech yesterday after losing his bid to reclaim his old U.S. Senate seat in Alabama. Sessions conceded yesterday's Republican primary runoff to Trump-backed former college football coach Tommy Tuberville. Tuberville will now take on Democratic Senator Doug Jones in November's general election. Joining us now, New York Times reporter Jeremy Peters, professor at the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, MSNBC contributor Victoria DeFrancesco-Soto, and host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. Good to have you all on board for this segment. Jeremy, I'll start with you and your analysis of the Jeff Sessions-Tommy Tuberville race. Jeff Sessions was sort of a Trump person until he wasn't, but he sort of embodied the Trump message, and yet Trump backed Tuberville. What's your analysis of the outcome of this race?
Well, I think, whatever Trumpism is, Mika, after last night's loss, but Jeff Sessions, you can honestly say that it is more about the man than it was ever about the ideas. Jeff Sessions was not only faithful to the Trump agenda, Jeff Sessions was on board with the Trump agenda before Donald Trump was ever a political figure. When Donald Trump was still a registered Democrat, Jeff Sessions was fighting immigration reform and helped defeat it in the Senate in 2007. When Donald Trump was still the host of The Celebrity Apprentice, Jeff Sessions hired a young Republican conservative staffer by the name of Stephen Miller and brought him under his wing and introduced him to Washington. And when Donald Trump was a pariah on his political campaign, his first political campaign for president, Jeff Sessions was the first Republican senator to endorse him. And the ideas that lit this populist nationalist brush fire that helped Donald Trump get elected were Jeff Sessions' ideas before Donald Trump ever embraced them. Now, after a 3-decade political career, Jeff Sessions has been kicked to the curb because Donald Trump has decided that he is disloyal and unworthy of service, and Alabama voters seem just fine with that.
And Jeremy, let's throw in at giving up his job to become Attorney General, where he was one of the architects of the family separation policy. He talked about leaving with his dignity intact. I guess that's up for debate now. His political career is over. So how are the people inside the state handicapping this race in the fall? Doug Jones has a tough fight to keep his seat against Tommy Tuberville, who last night called President Trump the greatest president of my lifetime, which for a Republican to say that, he was alive, obviously, when Ronald Reagan was president, is a big statement. But the goal here is to hug Donald Trump closely. What does it look like in the fall?
Well, I mean, that's just the kind of statement that these Republican politicians feel like they have to say, whether they believe it or not. And Willie, you and I both know from our conversations with these Republicans that for the most part, they don't believe that. It's something that's just compulsory for a Republican running for office today to say. Now, the Doug Jones race is interesting because nobody has been, a more loyal soldier having such a precarious political position, being kind of caught between the right and the left. He voted for impeachment. He's always been pretty good with most Democratic issues, but I don't yet see any evidence that the Democratic Party is going to put much money or resources into his race because, frankly, you're talking about a state that Donald Trump won in 2016 by almost 30 points. Even a really politically vulnerable Donald Trump like the one we see today, even with that, it's going to be hard for Doug Jones or any Democrat to win in Alabama.
Yeah, no question. Jeremy, let's move one state east. You're covering the state of Georgia as well right now. The President of the United States will be there today. Georgia is now a battleground state. He won by about 5 points last time around. That state has not gone for a very long time to a Democrat, but Democrats are now hopeful that Joe Biden may snatch that one away. What are the dynamics inside that state as it does become a battleground?
I think Georgia is really emblematic of the Republican Party's larger struggles under this increasingly unpopular president. I mean, you have a really winnable Senate race, 2 of them, actually. And there is real question right now in a lot of Republicans' minds, real heartburn, that this is going to be really, really close. David Perdue is about even in a lot of polls with his Democratic challenger, Jon Ossoff. That's really alarming. Donald Trump has been losing to Joe Biden in recent polls, including a Fox News poll that came out last month. Trump is headed to Georgia today to talk about the need to rebuild the nation's infrastructure. If you are going to Georgia in July as a Republican presidential nominee, that should tell the country how big a red flag there is hanging over your reelection prospects.
Well, Joe Biden is launching a set of new television and digital ads in Texas, Arizona, as well as Florida and North Carolina. So here's a look at the one that's going to run in Texas.
I'm thinking of all of you today across Texas. I know the rise in case numbers is causing fear and apprehension. People are frightened, and they're especially worried about their parents, their grandparents, their loved ones who are most at risk. This virus is tough, but Texas is tougher. We can stop the spread, but it's up to all of us to do it. We have to step up and do both the simple things and the hard things to keep our families and our neighbors safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands, stay home if you can, and socially distance when you go out. I want every single American to know, if you're sick, if you're struggling, if you're worried about how you're going to get through the day, I will not abandon you. We're all in this together. We'll fight this together. And together, we'll emerge from this stronger than we were before we began. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Victoria DeFrancesco-Soto, talk to me about Texas. Is it possible Joe Biden could take Texas?
Mika, I've always been very cautious when I say, oh, Texas is going to flip. It's going to go blue. Every election cycle, we get that talk. And I do think we are extremely close. And I'm going to go with the ocean metaphor, right? The blue wave. Waves swell. You know, it doesn't happen in one fell swoop. And we've been seeing that. We saw Hillary Clinton lose in single digits. We saw 2018, a lot of pickup across the state. And even though remember Beto, he lost. But in Texas, that's a win for Democrats. He came within 2 percentage points of Ted Cruz. We're seeing the momentum. We're seeing a lot of money coming into these races. And I think that if the coronavirus storm is anything, it can be a precipitating factor. So I'm still not going to put all of my money on Texas turning blue. But I think what's really important here is what I will put my money on is that in 2020, we are going to see the ball being moved down the field. I think that Joe Biden can come within 2 to 3 percentage points of Trump in Texas. And we might see, again, MJ Hagar, who won the Democratic runoff to go up against Cornyn, also come within those 2 to 3 percentage points. So while those aren't wins outright, I think in the larger picture, they put Texas on track to a very blue path in 2024.
Jonathan Lemire.
Hey, Reverend Al, I want to circle back a little bit to the Jeff Sessions portion of this discussion. He said last night that this would be the last race of his political career, that this effectively ends it. He, of course, was thought by most to have actually done the right thing in recusing himself from the Russia probe while Attorney General, although, of course, he incurred the wrath of the president, who never, ever, ever forgave him for that. But I want to give you a shot here. Speak to what his legacy is going to be like as Attorney General? Because so much of what he did, people around the president would try to cool Trump's anger because they said Jeff Sessions was arguably his most effective cabinet member in delivering the Trump agenda. What do you think? How is history going to remember Jeff Sessions' time as both senator, but particularly as Attorney General?
Jeff Sessions was opposed by most of us in the civil rights community when he was nominated. Had a terrible record in voting rights, had a terrible record in terms of dealing with policing and other issues. And once he was confirmed, he met with us, and he told us in the first meeting 2 or 3 weeks after he took the position, he was ending the consent decrees with policing, where there had been a pattern in certain cities of police abuse. He was not going to aggressively fight for voting rights. So his legacy would be that he really turned back the clock on the Justice Department that had began to pursue fighting for better police and dealing with voting rights and all, and that he lost his position with all that he did that was in lockstep with the president, Donald Trump, who wanted to reverse the era of Obama. He was rewarded with being kicked out the door because he did what was right on Russia. Unfortunately, that will be a footnote that he did the right thing, and what will be the major part, in my opinion, is that he was the one that turned the clock back on the Justice Department from where we had advanced from Robert Kennedy to Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch.
Rev, stand by. Jeremy Peters and Victoria DeFrancesco-Soto, thank you both for being on the show this morning. It is now for Business Before the Bell with CNBC's Brian Sullivan. Brian, let's take a look at the stock market, how it's reacting to promising results from Moderna's coronavirus vaccine trial.
Yeah, and there's actually 2 vaccine trials out there. Hi, everybody. Good to see you again. Listen, you got the Moderna, which is a small company. Very promising results, 45 patients. They developed antibodies. Not a lot of serious adverse reaction. All 45 did react. So that stock is way up. The stock futures are way up. The market's going to soar today unless something changes, because we all want this vaccine to occur one day after we have 67,400 new cases, a new record in the United States. There's also a very favorable trial, Mika, out of Oxford, England, and the major pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca. So it's not just one positive potential vaccine out there. There are 2. Now, you got to temper this. Obviously, you guys know, and you've talked about it, a vaccine, it gets done, it gets approved, it gets manufactured, it gets distributed. It could be a ways off. We understand that. But I think the hope, the optimism that we might be able to come out of this absent just herd immunity and 70% of America getting it is a very optimistic thing, and the market is reflecting that today.
All right, real quick on big banks defaulting. Is there a possibility that we're going to be seeing this?
Not yet, but watch this space closely, Mika. The $28 billion was set aside by the banks that have reported in the quarter for bad loans. Remember, I've said on my show on CNBC, the job market now, you got to worry about the job market in June of 2021, less June of 2020, because this recession could be longer and deeper than many think. Watch the banks, not in trouble yet, but they've got about $90 billion of CLOs, collateralized loan obligations. Go back and watch The Big Short or reread.
Yeah.
It's these instruments. They're not as bad as they were, but they are still out there, different forms, Mika, but they do exist. Wells Fargo has more than 20 billion of them. That's why that stock's been suffering.
Okay, and our company has big news today. Peacock making some announcements. What are they?
Yeah, Peacock. Okay, so we all pay for these streaming services. Peacock, which is the new launch from our parent company and Comcast, is going to be free. There is a paid tier, and on that premium tier, I don't know if you know anybody that likes Liverpool soccer team, Mika, but you can watch Premier League games on, so you can just sit and watch all day Premier League games as opposed to, Morning Joe in the morning, little CNBC, and then Premier League. So Peacock launches today. Congratulations to our parent company as well. A lot of free content out there, exclusive content, new shows we love like The Office, Parks and Rec, throwing a little Mika Brzezinski, little Joe, little Willie, little Premier League. What's not to love?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. CNBC's Brian Sullivan. Thank you very much. And still ahead, if the George